to the New Orleans Humanist Perspective, presented by the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association, following our few principles of humanism.
We're committed to the use of science and reason for understanding the universe and for solving human problems. We're skeptical of untested claims of knowledge, but we're open to new ideas.
We are concerned with securing justice and fairness in society and in ending intolerance and discrimination. We are committed to the total separation of religion and government.
We affirm humanism as a realistic alternative to the theologies of despair and the ideologies of violence. We reject the concept of an afterlife and believe in living a full and rewarding life here and now.
We value and respect each individual's right to judge and lead their lives according to their own position, as long as it's respectful of other people, living in a free society.
We hope you enjoy today's program and others in the weeks to follow. Hello, and thanks for being with us again. I'm Harry Greenberger, the host for this show, and our guest for today is Dr. Lloyd Harsch, who's professor of church history at the New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. Now, since you folks know that we secular humanists are non-believers, you might wonder, why am I going to be talking with someone from the Baptist Seminary? And I will have to say this: our experience with your organization has convinced us that you are a very open-minded group. This first came to our attention when a few years back on your Greer-Hurd Point-Counterpoint Forum, your topic was whether atheism was going to survive or whether it was dead. And we found that you had brought into this forum outstanding atheists from around the country, and we realized that you were open to hear two sides of any argument. You have a new forum coming up very shortly, and this time your topic is there life after death? And when I saw the list of participants, I again recognized outstanding non-believers who take one side of the issue. So we feel very comfortable talking to folks representing the Baptist Theological Seminary. Well, Lloyd Harsch wants to talk, among other things, about religious liberty, which is a topic, of course, of interest to us, and our audience knows that we only recently interviewed and had as a guest speaker John Barry, whose new book is on the whole topic of Roger Williams and the separation of church and state. But then there are other aspects that I think that we need to discuss, where I know that you and we are not going to be of the same mind. But in general, you want to introduce the topic of religious liberty. Tell me what you want to talk about.
Well, the concept of religious liberty is something that Baptists have held dear from our foundation. One of the earliest Baptists in the modern era was Thomas Helwys, and he wrote a book in 1612 called The Mystery of Iniquity, which was the first plea for religious liberty in the English language. He had done so after returning to England from exile, having been drummed out out of the country because of his religious perspective. He decided to come back and to live in England in spite of the persecution. Wrote the treatise on religious liberty and wanted to give a copy to King James I, the one who had authorized the King James Bible, which had come out just that year before in 1611.
Which you all are still using?
No, we have copies of them. We recently purchased a third edition of
my impression was that the King James Bible was the one in general use. Is that not so with the Baptists, or is it not in general use elsewhere?
It's in general use by some Christians and within some particular congregations, but as a general rule, it would not necessarily be considered in general. It would be one of the translations in general use along with other more modern translations.
But didn't, if I understand correctly, did King James revise the Bible to give him more authority? Is that what that was all about?
The prevailing translation that was available at that time was the 1560 Geneva Bible. That had been translated into English from the Latin and the Hebrew by exiles who had come out of England under the reign of Queen Mary. She reigned from 1553 to 1558, and she drove many of the Protestants back out of England as she tried to re-Catholicize England. Because of political reasons, they were not able to go over to Lutheran lands, so they went up the Rhine River to Geneva, where John Calvin was, and that was the connection for what became Reformed theology. When they translated the Bible into English, they had a lot of footnotes and marginal notes that were critical of the Queen and were critical of the monarchy. So when King James came to the throne, he wanted to have a version that was popularly used, but did not have those comments that were negative towards the monarchy and towards himself and towards his reign. So he authorized the translation of what now we call the Authorized Version or the King James Version.
All right. Now, to get more religious liberty, what occurred?
Well, he wasn't able. Thomas Helwys was not able to hand a copy of that to the king, so he inscribed in the front copy, the front cover of it, a description and dedication to King James, reminding him that he was a mortal man and not an immortal God, and that as a man he had the right as king to oversee individuals' lives, their liberties, their goods, their laws, but not what they believed. And he signed it, Thomas Helwys, I live in Spitalfield, and I'm right over here. 2 weeks later, he was arrested and he died in jail 4 years after that.
But that was the same position that Roger Williams took, which also got him into a lot of trouble.
That's right.
All right. Well, as you know, there is a great new book out by a New Orleans author about Roger Williams and church-state separation.
I look forward to reading it.
And and of course, what Roger Williams did in Providence, in the colony of Providence in Rhode Island, was to create a government which in no way interfered with or had any relation to the beliefs and the religion of the people. And from there came our secular government, created by we the people, not being authorized by some superior being up above, and then following the Constitution, which was ratified in 1788. Later came the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment, which included, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise. That's it. That's all it said. Now that one line in the Bill of Rights has been open to interpretation since 1817, whatever that was.
1991.
And it is still being debated today. Now, our position as secular humanists is that what it intended was that there should be absolutely no imposition of any religion in government or any government into religion. Do you hold to that?
I believe what the First Amendment said is there's to be no establishment of religion, and there's to be no infringement by the government on people of faith, of any kind of faith or no faith, to practice their worldview or their religion.
Yes.
And when you're talking about non-establishment, what that would mean is that, in fact, that the Supreme Court has defined that establishment is only if the government favors a comprehensive belief system and advances its teachings.
Now, where do you get that from the court? What court ruling said that?
That would be out of, I think, 1965.
All right. Well, I'm
I'll have to
looking
double-check which
at
particular
the
one.
opinion of Justice Hugo Black, which was in 1947.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like to read at least a part of it. And he said, the establishment of religion clause of the First Amendment means at least this, at least this. Neither a state nor the federal government can set up a church, neither can pass laws which aid one religion, aid all religions, or prefer one religion over another. Neither can force nor influence a person to go to or remain away from a church against his will, or force him to profess a belief or disbelief in any religion. No person can be punished for entertaining or professing religious beliefs or disbeliefs, for church attendance or non-attendance. No tax in any amount, large or small, can be levied to support any religious activities or institutions, whatever they may be called, or whatever form they may adopt to teach or practice religion. Neither a state nor the federal government can openly or secretly participate in the affairs of any religious organizations or groups, and vice versa. That vice versa is what I'm looking at. In the words of Jefferson, I'm still reading the opinion of Hugo Black. In the words of Jefferson, the clause against establishment of religion by law was intended to erect a wall of separation between church and state. The wall must be kept high and impregnable. Now, has something from Hugo Black's opinion been reversed?
Well, and I forget the Supreme Court Justice has mentioned, between the non-establishment clause and the free exercise clause, he calls it there's play in the joints. And that's been the struggle of the court, is defining to what degree can the government act and not be in violation of a restriction of freedom of religion, while at the same time not endorsing or establishing religion. And where they came to some of these decisions came in the 1960s, dealing with conscientious objectors, those that did not want to go to war. And according to the laws, you could get a conscientious objection from military service if you belonged to one of the historic peace churches. You had a belief in God. Then the courts rewrote that, not the courts, the Congress rewrote the laws for an idea in a supreme being. And in the 1965, in the United States versus Seeger, the decision came as you had three individuals, neither of which claimed to be Christian or have a belief in God. In fact, one of them, his idea of religion and God was, a response, a supreme expression of human nature. That was his definition of God. Well,
that's a different God from what established religions believe.
That's exactly right.
All right.
But the court was trying to decide whether that would qualify him to be able to claim a conscientious objection.
All right.
Because according to the law, you can't simply have a personal worldview or philosophy in order to be exempt. You have to be a part of some organization or some movement, some perspective that claims and holds to that. And it was during that 1965 ruling that they defined the religion as a sincere and meaningful belief that would be parallel to that which a religious belief would be.
All right. Now, having said that, how does that allow the government, federal or other government, to spend taxpayers' money for anything religious? How can that be justified?
Well, what kinds of things do you have in mind?
I have in mind paying for chaplains.
Okay.
Out of taxpayers' money.
All right.
Not only in the military, but in every level of government. The legislature has a chaplain. The state has a chaplain. Using some of my money.
Okay.
Now, If that First Amendment, according to Hugo Black, says no amount of money, no matter how large or how small, can be used in this respect, how can that be constitutional?
Constitutional in the... Now, when we're talking about the first establishment, again, that's Hugo Black's opinion in the midst of one court case, and he's rather expansive in his definition of what establishment is.
But that settled case has stood through the years.
Stood and been revised. Here's Seeger's 1965, which was relying upon that
But
case.
I don't see where that reverses the matter of taxpayers' money being spent on religious matters. How does that...
You're right. It does not reverse that, but it gives us an idea. If you're going to be in the military, let's start it from that point. If you're going to be drafted in the military, you're going to volunteer to be part of the military. The government now is going to be telling you where to go and where you can be on base and what kind of activities you can be a part of.
All of those things.
All of those things. Would you agree that human beings are spiritual people? Or that many human beings consider themselves
I
to
can't
be
agree or disagree unless we have a lot of discussion about the definition of spiritual. There are people who say, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. I don't know what they're talking about.
That's exactly right. But that, if there's at least a spiritual dimension to the human condition that any portion of the population would find meaningful.
But that is in opposition to being religious.
Well, not really. My father was a hospital chaplain. And when he became a hospital chaplain, his first job was working at a place where they had set up a job conditionally. It was only for 2 years. And they were trying to decide what, they had doctors for the physical side. They had psychologists for the emotional needs.
Was this a government-supported hospital?
It was a university-supported hospital.
With taxpayer money?
Yes.
I just wanted to determine, because, if it were a religious hospital, they have every right to do whatever they want.
Right.
We're talking about taxpayers' money. All
exactly.
Right?
And so the first 2 years were paid by outside people, not paid for by the government.
All
okay?
Right.
What they wanted to know is there an actual need for us as a hospital to provide a chaplain is there an actual need for a chaplain here in the hospital? And my dad did a survey of the patients themselves, and over 80% of the patients had a self-expressed spiritual dimension to their healing process, or as they understood why they were in the hospital. And that's an aspect of the human condition that the physician could not address. It was an aspect of the human condition that the psychologist could not address, and it was something that was necessary, that if not addressed, impeded the health of and the recovery of that individual, which was of import to the hospital.
I reject the concept that conditions of the Constitution can be overridden by popular vote, which is what you said. They surveyed the people. They said that's what they wanted.
That's not what they wanted. It was a need.
They might want something unconstitutional, but they're not entitled to have it.
Well, we can argue that with the hospitals, but if we're going to go back to the military, which is what you were talking about,
right.
If we're going to take people for whom there is a spiritual dimension, at least for a sizable portion of the population, that they believe that there is a spiritual dimension to life.
Let's say it's not 100%.
Right.
All right.
That's why I said a sizable portion. If we're going to put them in a place where we are not going to allow them to have access to a development or exploration of that spiritual dimension of life, then we are impeding a free exercise of religion.
Why should the taxpayers pay for that?
Because
that's the deciding factor.
That's correct. I grew up in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and we had a big Air Force base outside of town. I wasn't allowed on Air Force Base because I wasn't military personnel and I wasn't family. So how would I be able to provide a spiritual service to friends on the Air Force Base?
Let them come off the base and go to church.
Okay. And if the bases were in places where we do not allow our personnel off base?
They can sit and read the Bible and pray and do anything they want. Because my position is not that people should not have religion. I'm saying government should not pay for it.
And when you get into a war zone, that's not even possible.
What's not possible?
Individuals to say, to tell an individual who has a faith of whatever kind that wants to express that faith, who wants to meet with someone who is a pastor in whatever way you understand that to be, because we've denied them access to pastors.
Why does Roger Williams says shouldn't be anyone between a man and his God. Why does that soldier need someone between himself and his God? Why can't he just pray on his own?
He can pray on his own. What if he wishes to grow in that understanding of where he is, of his relationship, his religion?
Well, I mean, at this point,
we've denied them access.
If we're talking about he's in a foxhole, I think that prayers are about the most he's going to get, and there are atheists in foxholes too. So what is the government providing him? If they're providing the man next to him with some sort of a counselor, what are they giving the man who doesn't have a religion?
As right now, there are positions for I believe 3 secular chaplains, which can be an oxymoronic name.
In the entire world.
In the U.S.
That's not exactly how many military chaplains are there in the world?
I don't know. That's where I was wishing
thousands.
We would have Paige Brooks here.
I'm guessing thousands.
He was relating stories of being in Afghanistan and Iraq. He was recently there, and Jewish chaplains being moved around to minister to the spiritual needs of Jewish soldiers. We have Muslim chaplains. We have Christian chaplains. We have Wiccan chaplains. And you have chaplains based upon whether there are a number of participants in a particular worldview or religion that they can have a chaplain to minister to their needs.
I wonder what number they require. They're Jewish soldiers. How many rabbis do they have?
I don't know.
I suspect very few. But let me, if what you're saying is that the separation of church and state need not be total. I want to mention a couple of Baptists.
Okay.
And of course, the one that everyone knows about is the Danbury Baptist Association, who wrote to Thomas Jefferson because they were in trouble. And a part of his letter to the Danbury Baptists said, believing with you that religion is a matter which lies solely between man and his God, that he owes account to none other for his faith or his worship, that the legitimate powers of government reach actions only and not opinions, I contemplate with sovereign reverence that the act of the whole American people, which declared that their legislature should make no laws respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, thus building a wall of separation between church and state, adhering to this expression of the supreme will of the nation in behalf of the rights of conscience, I shall see with sincere satisfaction the progress of those sentiments which tend to restore to man all his natural rights, convinced that he has no natural right in opposition to his social duties. Now, one other Baptist that I'd like to I just would like to talk about, his name was John Leland, 1754 to 1841, a Massachusetts and Virginia Baptist preacher and prolific writer, was a friend and compatriot of Thomas Jefferson and James Madison, the fathers of the Constitution. It says here, among his comments are the following, quote, heaven forbid the bands of marriage between church and state. Civil government is not founded on Christianity. The notion of a Christian nation should be exploded forever. Government has no more to do with the religious opinions of mankind than it has to do with mathematics.
That's
now,
right.
There is a total separation of church and state, but your current position is we can bend that a little bit. Is that
No, because we're talking about not quite apples and oranges. When you're providing for chaplaincy, you're providing for a particular need of your soldiers, which is a spiritual need. You're not telling them to be religious. You're not telling which religion to follow. You're not telling whether they have to go to chapel or not. You're providing a service that is needed by your soldiers. Now, when you look at Thomas Jefferson's letter to Danbury, the Danbury Baptists had written to him shortly after he was elected, expressing their congratulations on becoming president, and, in a sense, trying to enlist his support in their battle in the Connecticut state legislature to disestablish the church.
Yes.
Now, we forget that when the country was started, that the states had significant authority and the federal government had a little bit. Now, when you read Hugo Blackman, you saying the federal government and the states, when the Constitution was written, it only applied to the federal government and not the states.
But at the time he rendered this opinion, they had included the states.
Right. But the reason I'm saying that is that even after the Bill of Rights, with the non-establishment clause, that affected the federal government only. And there were 3 other states that still had state-supported churches.
Correct. All right.
Connecticut being one of them.
Yes, but
and
then
so that's why they were trying to get support for argument with their state government.
All right. But Hugo Black says no tax in any amount, large or small, can be levied to support any religious activities. Now, a chaplain is performing religious activities. Now, have they overturned that position that the Supreme Court had?
That was Hugo Black's opinion in that ruling, and I think Hugo Black overstated the understanding, the government's understanding, and the Constitution's understanding of religious
liberty. He stated it correctly, personally.
You mentioned Thomas Jefferson with the Danbury Baptists. 2 years later, he responded to a letter from the Ursuline nuns here in New Orleans on whether they could keep their church property because it was paid for by state money under previous governments, the French and the Spanish. And he wrote back to them, yes, you can keep your property. Now, this is Catholics in a largely Protestant country, and they're also afraid of what might happen. He says, regardless of the nature of, or any proclivities of religion, you have your property, it's yours. In fact, considering the good work that you're doing, you cannot fail to ensure it the patronage of the government it is under.
Well, whose property was it?
It was the church's property.
Well, and he said you can keep your own property? I don't understand why that's a church-state matter.
Because it was paid for with state money.
And given to them or whatever.
It was, tax money that built the buildings, and it was tax money that provided.
It was state property or it was church property?
Well, when you have a state-church relationship, as you did under the French, it was coexistent.
Okay, well that's
so they were wanting clarity. But what we're talking about is sometimes we use that phrase, a wall of eternal separation, out of Jefferson as definitive of never the twain shall even meet or even wave at each other, whereas the same individual is saying, because of the good work you were doing, it cannot fail to ensure our patronage, whatever that might mean for Thomas Jefferson.
All right, Lloyd, we're almost out of time.
Okay.
And, of course, our positions are pretty much still opposed.
As opposed to chaplaincy, but on other things we would agree.
Well, all right. So you do recognize that church and state should have a wall.
Oh, there should be a clear disestablishment where they don't dictate beliefs.
Okay. Thank you, folks, for watching our show. We hope you will be with us again next week when we'll have another interesting program.